And welcome back to Crit and Crit. I am Axion.
And I'm Sit.
And we are continuing through Final Fantasy V and our discussion of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Today we are touching on another wonderfully uplifting topic, which is to say, the concept of cruel and unusual punishment.
Hooray!
So, 3 books in, we are no strangers to the fact that Hogwarts itself has some pretty bizarre detentions. It's not just here, write 100 times, I messed up, and I will do better. It's not just sit here without your phone for an hour and think about what you've done. It's go into the forest, which is rumored to have lethal monsters in it, and find the answer to this question, sort of thing. So, you could possibly look at that in a sense as a cruel and unusual punishment, but more to the point, we're looking at the existence of Azkaban.
So as we mentioned in our last episode, Azkaban is basically fantasy Alcatraz with everything cranked up to 11.
Okay, so I kind of want to talk about a little bit more before we really get to the whole Azkaban thing. Because, there is a step before that, obviously, like misusing magic, get you expelled, get your wand taken away. Which is kind of crippling, given how integral being able to perform magic is to just existing in the wizarding world. Being cut off from that, if that's what happens, like if you can't do magic without finishing school, it's never really made clear. We know that Hagrid is not supposed to use magic because he was expelled from Hogwarts, so we know he's not supposed to have his wand. But, as we mentioned, not everybody probably goes to Hogwarts, so if there are other, maybe less prestigious schools, you just have to graduate with some sort of wizard diploma to use a wand. But in either case, not finishing your education, as far as we've seen, means you are not allowed to participate in wizarding life.
Yep.
So,
which means you either need to find a way to cheat the system, which, to be blunt, is what Hagrid did.
Yep, has the broken pieces of his wand and that umbrella he always carries around. Totally does it, they just don't look at it too closely.
Or you need to have access to alternative methods.
Even just a support system. Like, if one of the Weasleys was expelled, they would still have a loving family to go home to that could take care of them and support them. They could find a way. Hagrid is an orphan. So, in Hagrid's situation, he had nothing else that he could do. Which is probably why Dumbledore was willing to bend the rules for him and let him stay on at Hogwarts, because where else would he go? He has nothing. Kind of makes you wonder what would have happened with Riddle if he'd been expelled, considering we also know that Riddle was in an orphanage when his wizard letter came.
Honestly, don't know. We could speculate on that sort of thing all day.
Yeah. So in this case, though, the idea of, hey, you've screwed up enough to get kicked out of school means you are literally cut off from any means of having an actual living unless you have somebody like Dumbledore willing to bend the rules for you. That could kind of be seen, in a way, as a cruel and unusual punishment. Like, I can't imagine, dropping out of high school actively dooming you to basically a life as a criminal, the same way that I carry a wand so I can participate in basic aspects of society, even though I'm not supposed to because I don't have my wizard diploma, does in the Harry Potter universe.
Right.
And it's entirely likely I am overthinking this, but that's the purpose of this series.
Yep. We are proud of our ability to overthink things.
But yeah, Azkaban. Island prison with no human staff. The only staff there are the Dementors. I actually wonder if there are human staff because, they mentioned meals and stuff, and I'm honestly not sure if, a Dementor knows how to cook, and they would be actually feeding the prisoners to keep them alive because they need a source of constant emotion to feed on.
No human guards, let's put it that way.
Can you imagine having to be the chef at Azkaban and all these Dementors are there all day? Like, do they just... do you think they might just take the human staff out at night so they don't have to be psychologically destroyed? I don't know. I'm overthinking this. I'm sure somebody's written 6 fanfics about it. But, yeah. So, Dementors feed on emotion, and just being around them sucks all the joy out of you and forces you to relive your worst memories. No one has ever been able to escape from Azkaban, they say, because losing that source of hope and joy makes you insane. Sirius mentioned that he couldn't go insane because the knowledge that he was an innocent man didn't make him happy. It was very depressing knowledge because, as we've mentioned, the fact that he did not commit the crime meant that he picked the wrong person for the job. So he's able to keep his mind, still be entirely miserable there, but he is able to plan his escape. Because, well, the Dementors can only tell, like, thoughts. Not the content of them, but, like, the complexity of. When things got too unbearable for him, he would use his animagus powers to become a dog, and they were just like, oh, his thoughts are real basic right now. He must be losing it like everybody else. Which is probably more articulate than Dementor is, considering they basically exist just to feed. But this is really where we get the worst of the cruel and unusual punishment. Wizards don't execute people. Not like that. The final punishment you get if you have gone beyond the pale for Azkaban is called the Dementor's Kiss, wherein they suck out your soul. Which, you know, that's so much better than the death penalty if you're 13 and reading this book as you grow up with the series like I was. That's not at all horrifying beyond belief. So it doesn't kill you. You're just basically wishing you were dead because there's nothing left of you. You might as well be in a vegetative state.
And growing up, I admittedly, it never crossed my mind when I read the book. But I also grew up in a family and a community where the death penalty was an accepted and supported thing. And I know that's not something that everybody is... not the kind of community that everyone grows up in, or spends a lot of time around. There are definitely places where people are less inclined towards that sort of thing.
Yep. So that's the fate that
when
Harry and Hermione actually have to save Sirius from.
Yeah, so when I first read that, having grown up in that kind of community and mindset and so forth, my immediate reaction was, well, yeah, of course that's a mercy. They didn't die. They didn't have the actual ultimate penalty put on them. They're still alive. But now with a better understanding of why that's a bad thing. I forgot to change Lena back to not a white mage.
Oh.
But yeah, with a better understanding of why people are object to the death penalty and all that, I have a better comprehension of why that's not a good thing.
Yeah, like, cruel and unusual punishment in this sense very much evokes the entire concept of a fate worse than death.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, at least with death, your suffering stops.
Exactly.
So, I have no mouth and I must scream. But yeah, so that's what the Wizarding World does. When they have people who cross the line, they either get excised from being able to participate in society, or they get put on an island of literal nightmares where you have to relive this every single day. So yeah, the Wizarding justice system could probably use a severe overhaul. Because honestly, taking someone's wand away while they're in prison is probably pretty obvious. Like, yeah, don't do magic in prison. Because then they just get out and there wouldn't be a purpose. So you need to have a setup similar to Azkaban where they're isolated enough and cut off from their supply of magic that they can't actually make use of it and all these spells they've learned.
It's also a matter of, and this is obviously a big debate in the current world situation and political sphere of, is prison punitive or rehabilitative? And Azkaban is very much on the punitive side of that. There is no rehabilitation happening in there whatsoever. And it's not intended to.
Yep. And it actually makes
cell.
Yeah. A holding cell where you're basically unspeakably psychologically tortured, which makes the second book worse after you get to see what Azkaban actually is, because poor Hagrid. Hagrid didn't do anything wrong and got sent there because he got framed for something 50 years ago. So, the Wizarding World is willing to send an innocent man into psychological hell, and then they just get an oops, I'm sorry when they're released.
Pretty much.
And who's to say they would have ever investigated it if Harry and Ron hadn't been doing the legwork because the adults weren't?
And honestly, is there any sign that they ever... I mean, even, as you said, there's no sign that they would have ever investigated further, and we don't even get any notification that they have any intent to do anything whatsoever to make this up to Hagrid. They barely even give him an apology.
Yep. So
Fudge says when they arrested him in Book 2 that if he's found innocent, which basically translates to if we find someone else to pin this onto, because you can't prove a negative, that they'll let him go, but he says nothing about any sort of payback or restitution for it, yeah. And there's no mention in the story in Book 2 or Book 3 about Hagrid getting any kind of formal apology or any payback or anything. He's just let go.
Yep. So that's kind of the problem when you have essentially an under-society, which we can basically say the Wizarding World is. They are kept hidden from the rest of the world, which basically means there's not as much in the way of official channels for what to do with transgressors. So they basically just stick them in a hole and hope they don't get out, which is what Azkaban is. But it also has, psychological torture 24/7. Anyone who goes there is subject to it because the Dementors don't discriminate. So if you have a loved one who is sent there for whatever reason and you want to go visit them, you're going to have to deal with the Dementors because it's just basically an aura. You're going to feel this every time you go there. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Yep.
So it's cruel and unusual punishment not just for the imprisoned, but also for any innocent bystander. Which makes it even worse, and really makes you wonder why this is the setup they have. We've seen some very intricate magical traps and other securities that can be put into place. You'd think that any one of those would work perfectly well for, a prisoner. The full body bind might even be a better alternative than Azkaban. It would still be another form of cruel and unusual punishment because, hey, you're permanently immobilized. You're fully aware of everything that's happening around you, but you can't move. I would call that pretty cruel and unusual as well, but still somehow better than the Dementors.
Alright, I think I know what the joke is with these guys. Gotta kill them all in the same blast.
Yeah, what would your thought on that be? Like, what's better? You are free to move around your limited cell in this constant state of ennui and depression that is forced upon you with no hope of ever being released from it, or we'll just put you in a normal jail cell, but you have locked-in syndrome. I think the answer is neither. They both
say
suck.
neither of those is a win.
Yeah, so maybe we need to find some way that wizards can, take care of transgressors in a way that doesn't violate the entire Geneva Convention. Because, honestly, this feels like psychological waterboarding.
It basically is. It's, like we've said multiple times now, it's torture, and it exists for the purpose of basically, basically just for the purpose of keeping all of these prisoners docile so that wizarding society is comfortable with them being out of their hair, basically.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind, which is going to later prove to be a horrible idea because of how many staunch supporters of Voldemort are in there, and we know that at the end of this book, Pettigrew escapes to go find Voldemort. So we've conveniently put a lot of people who will be very useful to that in one location. All you have to do is get them off the island. So, not only is it just needlessly cruel to everybody in there, and probably going to exacerbate any sort of issues that, put them in there, so the mass murder and everything, they'll be perfectly motivated when they finally get out to do more murders. So yeah, this is not fixing anything at all, and this can kind of speak to the larger. This is speaking to the larger issue of when your prison is solely punitive. What did you expect to happen? You've been priming the pump for this for years, and now you're mad that exactly what you set up to happen is going to happen. The only innocent person in there that we know of was Sirius Black, and he managed to somehow get out. We know how. He turned into a dog and left. Because he could swim as a dog. So, yeah. But the idea that the Dementor's kiss is still seen as acceptable by enough of society is worrying because, as mentioned, how many of these cases do they actually investigate? What if Hagrid hadn't been cleared? What if they decided to give him the kiss? And we know he was an innocent man.
Yep.
So, how many other people have been wrongly not quite executed but wish they were?
Honestly, that's probably an uncountable number. There's probably been... There's no way Hagrid was the first.
Well, Hagrid didn't happen to,
Right, but I meant innocent people in Azkaban.
Gotcha. I was on the Dementor's kiss part, sorry.
Well, it kind of goes from one to the other. Right. If Hagrid was not the first innocent person in Azkaban, then he's not the first person who had...
Yay, you win!
Okay, I need to go back to the mountain and get my float back on Bards, because, he lost it when he died. I need it for the boss I thought I was going to be fighting that was not that.
Well,
but I'm gonna just rest and see if I can get more ethers somewhere. They don't sell it here.
But yeah, it's just kind of a horrifying thing.
Yeah, what I was getting at is Hagrid is very likely not the first innocent person who's been imprisoned in Azkaban. Sirius is very likely not the first innocent person who's been imprisoned in Azkaban. And we don't know what it is other than when the council says so that makes the Dementors apply their kiss. And more importantly, we don't know that they don't just do it sometimes because they want to.
We do know they do it sometimes because they want to.
Well, that's
Remember?
what I'm saying.
That's what happened. That's what almost happened to Harry and Hermione.
That's what I was getting at. But we don't know that they don't do that in the prison, and we have every reason to believe that they would. So, there's some prisoner who may or may not be innocent, who just happens to be guilty of the crime of being in Azkaban too long. Regardless of if they are guilty or not, they've been in Azkaban all this time. Their records may be incredibly out of date. They may be this or that, or I forgot to switch classes again. They've been there for who knows how long. The Dementors just decide one day, oh, we're gonna kiss this guy. Done nothing to deserve it.
I'm sorry, I immediately just went to excuse me while I kiss this guy.
Yes. Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one that's where my brain went.
What would Jimi Hendrix's Patronus be, you think? I don't know. I'm sorry I'm opening this can of worms.
I was about to say, I don't know enough about Jimi Hendrix to answer that question.
It's a guitar. All I'll say is, let's go with a guitar.
Let's go with that, yeah. But yeah, they're in Azkaban, so 9 times out of 10, no one's gonna care. Maybe their family, but if their family has reason to think they're guilty, or has cut ties with them, or whatever, they might not even care.
And who might even notice? Because, it's been mentioned, the prisoners in Azkaban are so beaten down by the constant presence of the Dementors. Would a visitor even notice that something is wrong? Because they could say, yeah, they're completely listless anyway. It's normal.
I was about to say, visually, what is the difference between a soulless person who's been subjected to the kiss and a regular Azkaban prisoner who's so beaten down by the Dementor's presence that they are utterly inactive anyway? Maybe the second one's slightly more talkative, but not by much. They said that in Book 3 it mentions that Sirius was recorded as talking in his sleep. And I think Lupin says something along the lines of that that people who have been subjected to the kiss are soulless and thus utterly inactive. But at what point can you tell the difference?
Yep. So that's the state of justice in the wizarding world, is where the innocent, at least on 2 occasions that we know of, have been sent to Azkaban. One of them nearly put into a permanent coma because of false evidence after being framed by one of his own best friends for the murder of his best friend. And yeah, you really have to wonder what it's like to be Sirius at that point, because you have gone through the worst of what your society can offer to you, knowing that you're innocent, and you have absolutely no way to prove it because he got away.
And because he got away in a manner that is completely off the books.
Yep. You can't prove that you didn't kill Peter Pettigrew, because Peter Pettigrew faked his death and you don't have him to show for it. The only way to disprove that would be to present Peter Pettigrew. You can't do that.
Not to mention the whole unrecorded animagus thing.
Yep. So, yeah, that leaves Sirius in the untenable position of being a wizarding fugitive, which is still better than being in Azkaban. Though, if anyone ever catches him, he's probably getting kissed.
I mean, we know that, because they did catch him at the end of the story, and Snape basically made arrangements immediately for the Dementors to come give him the kiss, and he had absolutely no objections from anybody.
Yep. And
except for Harry, Ron, and Dumbledore. And Dumbledore didn't voice his objections aloud.
Yep. Because that wouldn't let Dumbledore do his little chess master thing.
Yep.
But, yeah, this really raises the question of, like, why the Dementors are allowed to have a position like this, when, quite frankly, they should probably just be exterminated because they provide no actual benefit to the world other than naturally sadistic prison guards, which probably will not last for super long. But, yeah, it's not a sustainable thing. It's actively detrimental to anyone connected with it, and it literally exists just to be a source of cruel, unusual punishment.
Yep. But it keeps prisoners quiet and out of sight, and for the status quo, that's enough.
Yay. Probably a good note to end on. Unless you have more to add.
Not really.
Until next time, then. Hopefully we'll talk about something less depressing. Probably not!
Not really. This is kind of the point in the story where everything happens, and that everything tends to be bad. Setting the stage for things to get much worse in the next 4 books.
Yay! Wait.
See you next time, folks.